Everyone says she trapped a billionaire. Wrong. They were both trapped from the first night. The cruel joke of this story is that neither Avery nor Damien ever really wins. She thinks she is signing up for 6 months of pretending, but walks into a dynasty of lies, threats, and blood. He thinks he is using her as a polished solution to a family succession problem, but ends up emotionally cornered by the one woman who sees through him. Then comes the ultimate twist. Betrayal from his own side, bullets flying, a hospital room, and the brutal realization that the only real thing in his life is the woman he never meant to love. That is not a twist, that is emotional destruction.
And so, our story begins as all tragedies do, with a morning that feels like any other until it isn't. Avery Lane awakens not to freedom, but to chains, tethered to a crime lord with an impossible choice. She could become his wife for 6 months, or watch him incinerate everything she holds dear. Their Las Vegas pact ignites a firestorm of violence. In time, she will flee, leaving him for ruin, only to be haunted by the question of whether tenderness can bloom in scorched earth. But for now, we begin where her world ends. The first sensation she registers is silk. This is no cheap imitation. It is the genuine article, flowing like liquid gold and worth more than her rent and utilities combined. Then the brutal Nevada sun pierces through colossal, unfamiliar windows. The third shock is the cold weight on her finger, an enormous, alien diamond that feels less like a gift and more like a verdict. She lurches upright into a thunderclap of pain. A vicious hangover takes hold, the world tilting on its axis as a drum pounds behind her eyes. Her mouth is a desert of cheap liquor and regret. Then she spies the silk dress, one she has never seen before. Oh God, she breathes, a mantra of no, no, no forming on her lips. The room is cavernous and cold, with the sterile scent of inherited wealth. Somber walls display expensive art, and the furniture seems torn from the pages of an architectural digest. This is a different universe from her small Henderson apartment, a place she was never meant to occupy. As Avery's feet touch the floor, a voice cuts through the quiet. "You're awake!" She spins, the room lurching violently. There, framed in the doorway, is a complete stranger, tall, with dark hair and dressed with an unnerving, timeless perfection. His face seemed carved from granite, but his gaze burned into her with a terrifying focus. His eyes, the color of cold steel, were brutally analytical, the eyes of a predator assessing its quarry, revealing nothing. "Who in God's name are you?" Avery's voice was a shredded whisper. "Damien Vascari," he replied, as if the name itself was a complete answer. "Your husband." The two words detonated in the heavy silence. He entered as if he owned the very air she breathed, and her along with it. In his hand, a folded document, a Clark County marriage license, dated a mere 3 hours prior. Avery could only stare at it as if it were a coiled viper. Impossible. "The Bourbon Street Wedding Chapel. I'm told you fashioned a veil from cocktail napkins, that your vows were quite affecting." His tone was flat, but a current of menace ran beneath it. "You don't recall?" "I don't recall things that did not happen." The state of Nevada would disagree. She snatched the paper, her eyes finding the damning evidence, her own signature. It was a chaotic, inebriated scrawl, but it was hers. Beside it, his name, Damien Vascari. The timestamp read 2:47 in the morning. "This is madness." Her hands trembled. "This isn't binding. We can file for an annulment. Now." "We could," Damien conceded, crossing his arms with an unnerving calm. "Alternatively, you could entertain my proposition." "Entertain your proposition?" A raw, disbelieving laugh escaped her. "I wake up in a stranger's house wearing—" She gestured at the slip. "Did you dress me?" "My staff attended to it. You spilled wine on your previous attire." "Oh, wonderful!" That makes perfect sense. Sit. I beg your pardon. Sit. It was not a suggestion. The sheer force of command in his voice drained the fight from her. She sank onto the bed, clutching the certificate like a cursed relic as Damien closed the distance to tower over her. He stood there, hands in his pockets, observing her as if she were an intricate problem to be solved. I will state this only once, he began. Pay attention. We were legally married last night. That is an established fact. I have no memory of it either, but the document is valid. I present you with two paths. The first, I initiate an annulment. We treat this as an unfortunate error and you return to your life. Yes. Fine. I choose that one. The second path, he continued, utterly dismissing her words, is you remain my wife for 6 months. You will perform the role for my social and business associates. In exchange, I will erase your debts, provide you with a residence, and you will depart with $500,000. Avery could only stare at him. What? My terms were clear. You are certifiably insane. I am pragmatic. He tilted his head, his expression a perfect mask. Your life is unraveling, Miss Lane. Student debt, exhausted credit cards, your mother's medical expenses. Your rent is 90 days in arrears, with an eviction notice due next week. You are working 2 jobs and sinking deeper. A cold dread bloomed in her stomach. How could you possibly know that? I know everything. That's horrifying. It is thorough. He stepped closer. Avery flinched back. He halted, his face unreadable. I require a wife. You require a savior. This is merely a transaction. Why? Her voice was barely audible. Why would a man like you need a wife? You have... Her gesture encompassed the opulent room. You possess wealth and influence. What could I possibly provide? My family has specific expectations. His words were clipped. My grandfather built an empire. His health is failing. He wishes to see me settled, to see me appear normal. I have no time for emotional entanglements. I do not need a wife who is inquisitive or sentimental. You are convenient. You are desperate, and at this moment you legally belong to me. I don't belong to anybody. Then you are at liberty to go. He produced his phone, holding the screen out to her. This is the world you return to if you walk away. Displayed on the screen was the full scope of her financial ruin. Account balances, past due notices, alerts from collections. The complete digital architecture of her failure, a profound and intimate violation. And every last detail was true. You cannot do this, Avery whispered. I am doing nothing. I am offering you a choice. That is not a choice. That is blackmail. Semantics. He pocketed the device. You have 10 seconds to decide. 10 seconds, I keep a tight schedule. You are a monster. 8 seconds. Avery rose to her feet, loathing her own helplessness, loathing this man who had flayed her life open and now pressed on every wound. And if I say no? She asked, her voice a thin imitation of courage. Then you may leave. A car is waiting to return you to your home. The annulment papers will be filed before 5 p.m. We will never cross paths again. And if I agree? You become Mrs. Viscari for a term of 6 months. You will reside here. You will accompany me to social and corporate functions at my direction. You will ask no questions. You will not dissent. You will obey my instructions without hesitation. When our time is concluded, you will walk away wealthy and unencumbered. That's a form of prostitution. No, Damien said, his tone like splintered ice. That is the definition of marriage. But spectral alarms were screaming in her mind. Past due, final notice, eviction. The calls from the nursing home regarding her mother's unpaid bills, her supervisor's warnings about her flagging performance. She saw her cramped apartment, the water stains on the ceiling, the useless heater. She tasted another dinner of instant noodles because a proper meal was a luxury. She saw her mother's hollow gaze, her consciousness fading because Avery could not afford the care she deserved. "Why me?" she asked again softly. "A consequence of misfortune. We were both intoxicated. You consented. This arrangement makes you an asset." "I utterly detest you." "You haven't earned the right." "I know more than enough." Damien consults his timepiece. "Time's expired. What is your choice?" Avery's gaze fell to the diamond. It shattered the light into a spectrum of hues, mirroring a fracture spreading through her spirit, an opening just wide enough for her despair to pour out. "Half a year," she states, her tone hollow. 6 months, then I'm free." "You will be released." She raised her head, meeting his stare with a single sharp nod. "Very well, I agree." For the first time, a faint emotion registered on his features. It was less a smile and more a fleeting hint of triumph. "Perfect. We begin now." A mere 2 hours passed, and she found herself facing the agreement. Avery sat in a sterile, austere room filled with ill-fitting decor, a stack of papers dominating the table before her. The attorney, a silver-haired woman in her 50s whose expression radiated profound ennui, had deposited them there. "Review this with care," she had instructed. "Place your initials on every page." "I don't have counsel." "Unnecessary. The conditions are perfectly transparent." Yet conditions rarely ever were. A faint smirk touched the lawyer's lips. "You are more astute than you appear." It was almost a compliment. Avery's gaze scanned the pages. The dense wall of legal language was staggering, but the essential conditions were brutally direct. 6 months of mandatory public engagements, no infidelity. Clause 7. B was heavily underlined: no communication with the press, no fraternizing with Damien's associates outside of sanctioned events. The compensation: all debts immediately settled, a $10,000 monthly stipend, and a final payment of $500,000. "This is completely insane," Avery breathed. "It is ironclad," the lawyer retorted. The Vascari family, Avery was learning, did nothing by half measures. The agreement on the table was more than paper. It was the architectural plan for her new prison. She would have her own quarters, but was required to perform domesticity in Damien's suite for family gatherings. A public showcase of her private capitulation. Her very identity was to be reconstructed. A stylist, a shopper, a team dedicated to sculpting the ideal wife. And then the penalty clause? A financial guillotine. Any breach of contract would double her debt against her. And if he transgressed? Avery had asked. He won't. But what if he does? The lawyer's face was impassive. He will not. Avery stared at the signature line, her hand trembling once more. This was the precipice. The moment she signed, Avery Lane, the indebted teacher, would be erased, supplanted by Avery Vascari, a stranger's wife in a world beyond her comprehension. Her mother's face materialized, a specter of impossible debt and the terror of the streets, a stark truth that the game was always rigged against them. With a pen stroke, her fate was sealed. The lawyer quietly retrieved the documents, locked them away, and rose. "It is a privilege to have you, Mrs. Viscari." That is a cruel joke. I was not making one. Damien appeared at noon, without his jacket. In only a white shirt and trousers, he seemed almost human, but the frozen wasteland in his eyes remained. "Your possessions are being relocated," he announced, his voice flat. "My assistant has the particulars. You have 1 week to collect any personal items from your former apartment. You are evicting me. Your residence is here now. I did not consent to this." He simply raised an eyebrow. "You placed your signature on the contract. I signed that 5 minutes ago. Then permit me to formally welcome you to your new life." He consulted his watch, a gesture losing its appeal with incredible speed. "We will dine with my family this evening. At 7 o'clock sharp. Choose something suitable. I own nothing suitable for that kind of dinner. You will shortly." The stylist arrives in 20 minutes. Avery got to her feet, the familiar migraine roaring back. "Can you not, for 1 second, see how deeply wrong this is?" "No. And why should I? Acknowledging it changes nothing. You made your decision and I made mine. We are both imprisoned by them." "I decided nothing," she retorted. "You engineered a corporate ambush. Functionally, it's identical. It is not even remotely the same." Damien regarded her for a long, quiet interval, and Avery felt as if she were dissolving under his stare. It wasn't unkind, merely vacant, the look one gives an object before setting it aside. "My family is difficult," he said at last. "They will test for weakness, offer them nothing, have no convictions, just smile, nod, and I will do the talking. So I am to be a decoration. You are my wife. The same thing." This time, a muscle near his mouth flickered. Not quite a smile, but in the same territory. "You learn quickly." The stylist, a tiny woman named Simone, was a tempest of constant chatter and unshakable opinions. She assessed Avery with a single glance and sighed as though her mere existence was a personal slight. "This will be a Herculean effort," Simone proclaimed. "What is so wrong with me? How much time is there?" Avery was subjected to 2 hours of what Simone termed urgent remediation: hair, styling, wardrobe. When she finished, Avery was a stranger in the mirror. This version of her was poised, sophisticated, and breathed expense. She wore a black gown valued at more than her car, heels that gave her impossibly long legs, and jewelry that thrummed with raw financial might. "An upgrade," Simone stated, circling her like a predator. "Not ideal, but an improvement." "Thank you." "Of course." "Now your carriage. Erect, no slouching. You are the wife of Damien Viscari, not some office drone. And the distinction is roughly $40 million and a considerably higher risk profile." Avery froze. "Risk profile?" Simone waved off the question. "That is outside my purview. Now walk." "My walk is fine. Your walk is forgettable. We need an aura of nobility. I'm a teacher, not a royal. You're a Viscari now. It's the same." By 7 p.m., Avery stood in the marble foyer of Damien's residence, adorned in a fortune, and feeling like a fraud. Her anxious hands gave everything away. Damien emerged at the crest of the sweeping staircase, again in a full suit, his every motion polished by a lifetime of formal gatherings. "Are you prepared?" he asked. "No." "Excellent. Then we shall go." Their transport was a black Mercedes with soft leather and a driver who moved in absolute silence. Damien was an unmoving presence at her side, his face cast in the cool light of his phone as Avery watched Las Vegas bleed into a neon abstraction beyond the tinted glass. From within the car's silent grandeur, the city was a faraway performance, a life she had been severed from. "Where are we going?" she asked into the quiet. My grandfather's estate. How many gilded cages does your family maintain? 3 in Nevada, 2 in California, and 1 in Italy. Of course you do, she thought with acid sarcasm. He finally turned his face to hers. Anxious? He inquired. Terrified is the more precise term. Do not be. They are simply people. The lie was like poison on her tongue. The wealthy are never simply people. A flicker of a muscle in Damien's jaw. You may be right. The estate was proof. A vast Mediterranean villa in Summerland, bristling with gates, guards, and a staff, large enough to form a small village. The driveway was a procession of luxury vehicles, Bentleys, Maseratis, and a Rolls-Royce that looked like a museum piece. Damien's driver pulled to the entrance, where a valet appeared instantly to open Avery's door. The curtain rises, Damien whispered. He exited before offering his hand. His touch was warm, his grasp secure, and when her heel snagged, he steadied her without a word. For one brief moment, their eyes connected, and Avery detected something shift in his. It was not warmth, but it was no longer ice. Stay near, he said, his voice low. And do not forget that you are completely in love with me. I don't even know you. They do not require that information. The great doors swung open unbidden, revealing a woman in her 60s with eyes of granite and a face to match. She wore diamonds as if they were armor, and her inspection left Avery feeling utterly exposed. Damien, the woman announced, you have delayed us. Traffic? There is no traffic in Summerland. In that case, I am merely late. The woman's gaze snapped to Avery. And this, Damien declared, is my wife. His hand came to rest on the small of Avery's back, an idle proprietary touch that felt like a brand. Avery, this is my aunt, Gabriella Viscari. Charmed, Gabriella said, her voice laced with the opposite feeling. How very abrupt. Life is frequently unpredictable, Damien countered without hesitation. As they stepped inside, Avery's breath caught. The place made Damien's own home seem Spartan. There were painted ceilings, marble columns, priceless art, and a room filled with people. So many people. Every head turned as Damien escorted her toward a vast dining room. Everyone. Damien's voice cut through the noise with a chilling resonance. I would like you to meet Avery, my wife. A weighted, immediate silence consumed the room. Then from the head of the table, a voice like gravel and cheap liquor broke the spell. Well, the old man growled, it's about time. The dinner that followed was an exercise in pure survival. Positioned at Damien's right, Avery felt the profound pressure of their scrutiny. Every look a quiet verdict. The patriarch Lorenzo orchestrated the meal like a sovereign, his questions masked as conversation but feeling like precision strikes. So tell me of your meeting, Lorenzo asked, his steak knife moving with unnerving skill. A charity function, Damien replied, his voice perfectly level. Avery was organizing the event. I was in a foul temper. She made me laugh. Down the table, a low voice sneered. I was not aware you could. The comment came from a cousin, a man with slicked hair and a smirk that made Avery's skin prickle. I contain multitudes, Damien responded, his tone dangerously level. And you, Avery? Lorenzo's pale gaze found her. What do you do? I teach English at a public high school. A teacher? He said the word as if it were an accusation. How novel. I find it rewarding, Avery said, her voice unwavering. The students are good people for the most part, and you will be entering the family business, I take it. The family business? Construction? Damien interjected, his voice sharp. The cross-examination was a coordinated assault, led by Lorenzo, who clearly doubted her scholastic world had prepared her for his own. The entire clan took part in the vivisection. Aunt Gabriella's questions were cold and surgical, while Cousin Marco made barbed remarks about their Las Vegas nuptials. Throughout it all, Avery was so gripped by nerves she could not eat, as Lorenzo simply observed her, his expression impassive. Then, as dessert was presented, he moved in for the final blow. "So explain to me why you consented to marry my grandson Damien." The patriarch, Lorenzo, posed the question bluntly. Damien was a ruthless man, so what qualified her as his wife? Absolute silence descended. Every eye was on her. Just then, Damien's hand came to rest on her knee. Was it reassurance or a warning? Avery looked from one man to the other and offered her truth. He asked. She added, "And I believe there is more to a person than what is on the surface." After a taut pause, Lorenzo erupted in laughter. "This one has fire," he announced. "Do not dare extinguish it, Damien." And Damien simply replied, "I will make every effort not to." The instant the car door was shut, Avery's manufactured smile collapsed, and she began to tremble. Damien, seated like a stone figure, spoke. "You managed that situation well." When she admitted she felt sick, he merely said, "You disguised it perfectly." He asked if his family was always so formidable, and she confirmed they were. Then his own composure fractured slightly as he conceded she had done the impossible by winning their favor, only to reveal the true tragedy. His grandfather had stage 4 cancer with only 6 months remaining, and then Damien lets the cold truth fall between them. Lorenzo is dying, and this marriage is merely his final wish. The whole affair is a staged production for a dying man, with Avery cast in a leading role she never auditioned for. The weight of her reality presses down on her. A quiet apology escapes her lips, but he brushes it aside, remarking that his grandfather has outmaneuvered death before in his profession. When she probes about his work, he simply turns to the window, ending the conversation. At his vast estate, she is guided to an opulent, lonely room. "You need to rest," he states. "Tomorrow you begin preparing for your next performance." "Then you'd better learn to fake it," he says, turning to go. But Avery's voice stops him, demanding the real reason he chose her. For a fleeting moment, his glacial composure cracks. "You wanted to vanish," he tells her, his voice a low murmur. "You were tired of being unseen, so I forced the world to look at you." She calls it a cage. He calls it a choice. When she argues they aren't the same, he agrees with the chilling finality. No, they are not. And with that, he is gone, leaving Avery ensnared in her new, brilliantly lit, gilded prison. The wedding band on her finger feels more like a shackle than a symbol of love. Her phone, a useless brick, serves as a stark reminder of her complete isolation. She is a captive in a palace, trapped in a part she never agreed to play. The woman named Avery Lane has been meticulously erased, replaced by the hollow title of Mrs. Viscari. With the gallery opening just 3 days away, she is utterly lost at sea. The following morning, a meticulously color-coded schedule appears, the official script for her new existence. 8 o'clock, breakfast with Damien. 9 o'clock, a fitting for her new wardrobe. 11 o'clock, training for the media. After a 30-minute lunch, a 2 o'clock lesson on proper poise was slated, and instruction on how to carry herself like a woman from a bygone era. The bathroom alone dwarfed her former apartment, and the closet was a showroom of designer apparel, tags still on, evidence of a life being systematically dismantled. In the dining room, Damien was already waiting. his gaze fixed on a tablet, a single black coffee, his only companion. His eyes scan her, an appraisal more than a greeting. "You're on time," he notes. "Good." Her sharp reply, "Yes, I'm familiar with how a clock functions," is cut down instantly. That kind of tone will not serve you on Friday night. Avery retorts that nothing about Friday night seems poised to serve her at all. When a server refills her coffee, her simple "thank you" is vetoed by Daman, who, without looking up, says, "You don't thank the staff." "And why the hell not?" she challenges. "They are compensated for their duties." "They're still human beings," she counters. He simply raises an eyebrow, a silent judgment on her naivete. "You're going to struggle with this." "With being a monster," she snaps. "With being pragmatic," he corrects, setting his tablet aside. "This gallery event is immensely important." He details the landscape: family, influential guests, cameras, reporters. "Your every action is a reflection on me." Her sarcasm about the pressure is met with a deadpan stare, forcing her to concede she is in no way prepared. "That is what the next 3 days are for," he says, his voice laced with ice. Her media consultant, Richard, then enters in a whirlwind of cologne and nervous energy. "Rule number 1, he declares, is you never, ever reply no comment. It's an admission of guilt." When she asks guilt of what, he dismisses the question. Perception is everything. The strategy is to deflect to a pre-written statement, which he provides on a laminated card filled with lifeless, corporate-approved phrases she must commit to memory. "This reads like a company press release," she observes. "This is how you avoid being devoured," Richard counters, launching directly into a practice run. He thrusts a mock microphone toward her. "Mrs. Viscari, how does it feel to marry into one of the most powerful families in Vegas?" Avery's hesitation is treated as a critical error. "A delay suggests you have a secret. Again." Her second try, a feeble "it's lovely," earns a theatrical groan. "Lovely, she says lovely. We are in so much trouble." For 2 agonizing hours, they ran the drills until Avery could parrot the lines mechanically, feeling more like an automaton with each repetition. Following that were posture sessions with Celeste, a woman who regarded Avery's posture as a personal affront. Celeste made her practice walking with a book balanced on her head, issuing sharp commands. Avery's attempt to explain her background as a teacher was ignored. "You are Mrs. Viscari now." The book fell for the 5th time, and Celeste let out a sigh that sounded like the death of a dream. He finds her in the library that night, buried in flashcards and stale coffee, attempting to decipher a family tree resembling a criminal organization chart. "Still at it," he observes. Her bewilderment over a cousin with 3 marriages draws a faint, almost imperceptible smile from him. "You're not wrong to be confused," he concedes, his eyes at the convoluted diagram. He sits and loosens his tie, and for a moment she glimpses a weariness in him that no amount of wealth could ever cure. Avery seizes the opening to pose a question, to which he replies, "You just did." "Can we be honest for a moment?" she presses. "Why all the animosity?" "Towards whom?" he counters. "Your family. You speak of them like a hostile business negotiation." A dense silence settles in the room. His fingers drum against the table, the first visible tremor in his composed facade. "Not animosity," he says at last. "A complete lack of trust." That feels so much worse, she reflects. "Perhaps," he allows, rising to his feet. "Get some rest. Tomorrow the charade reaches a new level." He wasn't wrong. The next day involved a 3-hour photo shoot of their fabricated romance. Avery was certain Daman had never been in the kitchen where they were meant to look so intimately at ease. The photographer's constant plea to just be natural felt like the cruelest of jokes. Instructed to gaze at Daman with adoration, all Avery could see was the man who held the next 6 months of her life in his hands. "You're lost in your thoughts," Daman murmured for her ears alone. "It's the only property I have left," she retorted. "Then find a better neighborhood," he advised. But her mind was replaying a montage of her life's hardships. Unpaid bills and her mother's vacant expression. Joy was a destination she had only ever witnessed on postcards. "I can't do this," she whispered. In that instant, something shifted in Daman, a flicker of genuine humanity in his gaze. His hand gently covered hers, its warmth a surprising comfort. "Then just hold on," he whispered back. "That's all the job requires." The camera clicked and the photographer shouted, "Perfection!" That night, alone in the cavernous bed, Avery strained to hear the distant sounds of Daman's existence until an eerie, absolute silence fell over the house. She began to question if he felt anything at all, or if she was just another entry in one of his ledgers. Abruptly, her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number, a summons to the east sitting room the next morning, alone. She typed back a cautious query asking who it was. The response was immediate and definitive. "Gabriella, we have things to discuss." The following day, Gabriella Vescari was already present, presiding over an armchair as if it were a throne, radiating an aura of regal, formidable authority. "Sit," Gabriella instructed. It was an order, not an invitation. "Coffee?" "No, thank you." "Wise girl. Caffeine is a crutch for those who lack resolve," Gabriella stated, then took a long drink from her own cup. Her gaze was a tangible pressure. "Now let's dispense with the pleasantries. This marriage is an absolute fraud." A knot of ice formed in Avery's stomach. Her attempt at a denial was swiftly silenced. "I have navigated this viper's nest for 40 years. I recognize a genuine union, and this is not one." Gabriella leaned forward, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "So, let's get to it. What is your play here?" Avery counters. "I signed a non-disclosure agreement," but Gabriella merely scoffs. "Paper is just paper. It can be torn." Avery's hands tighten into fists in her lap. "I am not here to make trouble. I just need to get through the next 6 months." 6 months? Gabriella's eyes gleam like a hunter detecting a vulnerability. "Such a precise timeline. It has the scent of a contract." "I didn't say that." "Your fear is shouting it." The matriarch leans back, her gaze boring into Avery. "You're more cunning than you appear. I'll grant you that. Damien requires it. His last little dalliance was as thrilling as damp toast." There was another. "A few. They didn't pass muster." She sips her coffee. "But you're an entirely new design." "How so?" "You're truly terrified. The others were only acting." "You're clearly an outsider, and you're not even skilled at concealing it. That's either courage or profound foolishness. My money is on foolishness." For the very first time, an authentic smile touches Gabriella's lips. Not a warm one, but the look of someone assessing a new amusement. "Against my better judgment, I find this entertaining. So here is some unsolicited advice. Just survive the first month. And the pressure eases after that." "Whose pressure?" "All of it." Gabriella rises, smoothing her skirt. "Oh, and Avery, discard everything you think you know about us. It's all performance." We are a family of shadows and reflections, every last one of us. And with that, she departs, leaving Avery's heart hammering in the now deafening silence. The veiled warning had been delivered with terrifying clarity. This was no contract she signed. It was an entry into a lethal labyrinth of invisible snares. The gallery event felt less like a party and more like an attack on the senses. For 4 hours, Simone had chiseled her into the image of a red carpet siren. The gown was the color of a starless night. Its slit climbing so high, it sparked a quiet, constant panic in her chest. Her hair, her makeup. The woman staring back from the glass was an absolute stranger. "You're a corporate instrument now," Simone confirmed with a self-satisfied look. That was always the point. And then Damien appeared, and for the first time, he simply froze. His gaze swept over her, and the impenetrable mask he wore showed its first true crack. "You look," he began, his voice failing him. "Like an instrument," Avery supplied, her tone laced with ice. "I was aiming for stunning, but I suppose that's close enough." The gallery was a converted warehouse at the heart of Vegas, a sterile cathedral to minimalist art. The moment their car stopped, a swarm of photographers descended, a violent storm of flashing bulbs and shouted inquiries. "Brace yourself," Damien commanded. "You smile, you wave, you say nothing. I will deal with them. And if they ask me something directly, deflect. You had 2 hours of media training for this very scenario." The door swung open to sheer bedlam. Damien stepped out, then reached back for her. His hand closed around hers like a steel cuff as she was plunged into the tempest of light and noise. "Mr. Viscari, right here. Who is she? Is the engagement story real?" Damien's arm coiled around her waist, anchoring her to his side. To the cameras, it was a display of united power. To Avery, it felt like being locked inside a cold, beautifully crafted cage. "Smile," he whispered against her ear, so she did. She manufactured a smile until her muscles screamed, waving at a formless crowd as Damien carved a path through the throng and into the gallery. Inside was merely a more refined battlefield, filled with beautiful predators, flowing champagne, and art that cost more than a small nation. "Stay by my side, whatever happens," Damien instructed. A command Avery had no intention of testing. They had barely 10 minutes of quiet before a man intercepted them. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and vacant eyes of a hunter. "Damien," the man purred, his voice dripping with false warmth. "I heard you finally tied the knot. Victor." Damien's tone plunged 20 degrees. "This is my wife, Avery." "Avery, Victor Castellano," the shark who owned half the city. "Only half," Victor corrected with a smirk, his gaze fixed on Avery. "The pictures don't do you justice. Tell me, how did you finally land the greatest catch in Vegas?" "I didn't land him," Avery replied, clinging to the pre-written script. "We were fortunate enough to cross paths." "How lyrical." Victor's smile was a predatory display. "And what is your story, Avery?" "I'm a teacher." "How quaint," he remarked, as if she'd confessed a terminal weakness. "I'm certain Damien can find you more appropriate work." "Teaching is appropriate work," Avery countered, surprised at her own defiance. "It has value." "Of course." Victor shifted his focus back to Damien. "We have to talk about the Henderson deal." "This is not the time, Victor." "The clock is ticking." "With you, it never stops." Damien's hand tightened on her arm. "My office tomorrow." Victor's artificial smile dissolved. "Tomorrow." He gave Avery a curt nod. A pleasure, Mrs. Viscari. When he was gone, Avery felt she could breathe again. I truly cannot stand that man. Join the queue. He is, however, a necessary evil. For what purpose? Business. Damien guided her toward a quieter corner. You handled yourself well. My first impulse was to hit him, as was mine, but that is not how this game is played. Then what are the rules? Before he could answer, Lorenzo materialized from the crowd. The old Don leaned on a cane, yet the masses parted for him as if for royalty. Grandfather, Damien said, his voice utterly flat, you brought the girl? Lorenzo's milky eyes settled on Avery. Good. Let me see the merchandise. Avery held her ground as he appraised her like livestock, meeting his gaze and refusing to break. She will do, Lorenzo declared into the charged silence. She has spirit. Good. Damien requires a wife who will not break. I am not an object, Avery snapped, the words escaping before she could restrain them. A low chuckle rumbled from Lorenzo's chest, the same she recalled from dinner. No, that much is obvious. Now you will come with me. Let Damien conduct his affairs. It was an undeniable order. As Lorenzo moved, Avery was forced to follow, the intensity of Damien's gaze burning into her back. The old man led her away into shadowed alcoves where abstract art hung like secrets. Do you understand art? Lorenzo asked. Somewhat. My degree is in literature, not art history. Good. Those who claim to understand it are almost always liars. He gestured to a canvas that was a raw explosion of controlled violence. Tell me what you see. Avery studied it intently. It's chaos with a direction, fury focused on a single point. Precisely. Lorenzo's cane tapped the floor. That is my grandson. A storm held in perfect check. He has been this way since he was a child. Do you know the reason? No. Because his father was executed when he was 8 years old. They reported it as a traffic accident. It was an assassination, a message from a rival family. Lorenzo's voice was a chilling void. And Damien was the one who discovered the body. A gasp caught in Avery's throat. That's monstrous. It is, but that is the crucible that forged the man you see today. Focused, deadly, and entirely without pity when the situation demands it. Lorenzo faced her, his eyes pinning her in place. I share this, so you grasp the world you now inhabit. This family does not operate by conventional laws. We do not have that luxury. Then whose laws do you obey? Our own. He studied her expression. Does this truth disturb you? Should it? Yes. But I sense you are not easily frightened. I saw your encounter with Gabriella. He knew. She reports everything to me. A ghost of a smile touched Lorenzo's lips. She has developed a fondness for you. A first. Gabriella despises everyone. I've noticed, Avery thought. Some advice, child. The coming 6 months will be an ordeal. My family will probe you for weaknesses. Some will try to break you. You must not allow it. How do I prevent that? By recalling that you are a Viscari. The name is both your shield and your sword. Wield it. He resumed walking, Avery following, her mind in turmoil. Every sentence from Lorenzo was both a warning and an initiation. Upon returning to the main room, Damien was in a terse discussion with men in expensive suits. His head jerked up as they approached, and a silent, complex exchange passed between him and his grandfather. I am weary, Lorenzo announced. Take me home. I'll have Marco drive you. Not Marco, the two of you. The drive to Lorenzo's estate was shrouded in a dense, oppressive silence. The old man sat in the front, while Damien drove and Avery watched the Vegas lights bleed into abstract streaks from the back seat. They pulled up to the estate, but Lorenzo remained in its vehicle. "Damien," he commanded. "A moment." Avery understood her cue and stepped out, observing their muted, urgent conversation. She could not discern any words, but Lorenzo's agitated gestures contrasted sharply with Damien's stone-faced stillness. At last, the Don emerged and fixed his gaze on Avery. "You will attend dinner on Sunday." The words were a summons, not an invitation. "Yes, sir." "Good. And Avery, place your trust in no one, not even him." He gestured toward Damien. "Especially not him." Then he vanished into the great house, leaving Avery with a profound sense of unease. As if on cue, Damien reappeared by her side. "What did he say to you?" Damien's voice was stretched thin, on the verge of snapping. "Nothing of importance. He is lost in his delusions. The medication only makes it worse. He seemed entirely clear-headed to me." Damien offered no response. The trip back was suffocatingly quiet. At their own home, Avery moved toward her room, utterly exhausted. She was reaching for the handle when Damien's voice stopped her. "You performed your role admirably tonight." She turned to see him in his doorway, his jacket and tie removed. For a brief moment, he looked vulnerable. "Your grandfather told me about your father," Avery said quietly. A flicker of raw pain crossed Damien's features. "That is a private family matter." "He wanted me to understand." "There is nothing to understand. That was another lifetime. You were only a child." "I am no longer a child." He retreated into his room. "Good night, Avery." The sound of the lock was a final, definitive closure. She secured her own door and sank onto the bed. Her phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Welcome to the family. Watch your back." She stared at it for a long moment before deleting it, but the words lingered, a phantom in the darkness. The unspoken menace haunted the following days, far more potent than any text. Life settled into a twisted routine, strained morning coffees with Damien, where they sat like diplomats at a truce talk. Her afternoons were spent with Simone, being sculpted into the perfect Mrs. Viscari. Her nights became a dizzying sequence of galas and family meals, where each smile was a carefully crafted lie. Beneath it all lay the immense pressure of the deception, of pretending to belong, to feel anything for this man, to believe this was anything more than a contract with an expiration date. Then, in the third week, something shifted. It began subtly. Damien started to solicit her opinion on small matters, which tie he should wear, whether to serve salmon or chicken, if the Picasso was better suited to the hall than the Rothko. It all began with meaningless things, choices of no real consequence. Except they took on a terrible weight as he fulfilled every single one of her casual suggestions. Then came the morning she descended the stairs to find her favorite coffee, already prepared. Not the artisan blend Damen favored, but the cheap vanilla creamer she'd mentioned once weeks ago, a ghost from the life she had abandoned. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the bottle. Damen remained devoted to his phone. "The pantry." "I didn't stock the pantry with it." "I did. But why? You mentioned you liked it." "I said it one time." One time was sufficient. He finally met her eyes, and they burned with a new intensity. "Stop cross-examining the coffee, Avery. Just drink it." And so she did. It tasted of her old existence, a time that was infinitely harder, but entirely her own. The Sunday dinners at Lorenzo's estate became a weekly ordeal, The same calculating faces, the same probing questions hidden behind idle chat, and the unending sensation of being measured and dismissed. Marco, the cousin with the slicked back hair and covetous eyes, would invariably corner her the moment Damen was occupied. So, Marco invaded her space by the bar one evening while Damen was pulled away. "How are you finding married life?" "It is satisfactory," Avery replied, her tone a flat line. "Merely satisfactory? That sounds painfully dull." "I am painfully dull?" "Somehow I doubt that very much." Marco leaned closer still, his costly cologne failing to mask the whiskey on his breath. "I would wager you are playing a role. We all are. The only real question is, what is your ultimate goal?" "I don't possess one." "Everyone desires something. Money, security, a small portion of this world before you are discarded. I desire for you to step away." Marco simply chuckled. "You have a certain sharpness. I appreciate that. Damen was always drawn to the complicated ones." "What is that supposed to imply?" "It implied you're not the first woman who believed she could save him, but you might just be the first one who—" "Marco." Damen's voice cut through the party's ambiance like a shard of glass. He was suddenly there, beside Avery, his face an unreadable void. "Vanish." "Hey, we were only talking." "No. You were crowding my wife. There is a vast difference." Marco's smug expression finally fractured. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Easy, cousin. I was just being friendly." "Be friendly somewhere else." As Marco slithered away, Avery released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Damen's hand rested on the small of her back, a gesture that felt equal parts protection and possession. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. "I can handle Marco." "I know you can, but you shouldn't be forced to." He guided her from the crowd. "The man is a fool. Pay him no attention. He said I wasn't the first. You're not." That brutal honesty struck her with more force than she had anticipated. "How many others were there before me? Does it alter anything?" "Perhaps." Damen halted their movement. They were isolated in the hall, the party a distant echo as he faced her. 3. Over the past 5 years. They were all arrangements identical to ours. None of them endured beyond a few months. What became of them? They desired something from me I could not provide. What did they desire? Me. He uttered the word as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The real me, not the contract, not the performance. They wanted a man I do not know how to be. Avery searched his eyes for any trace of a lie. She found only a severe, terrifying truth. "And I? You are different." "How?" "You do not want me." And so, the very fact that Avery yearned to flee, he argued, was what made her less of a complication. For whom, you wonder? For the both of them, it seemed. But before she could process that twisted logic, Gabriella appeared to announce dinner was ready. The meal was a masterclass in controlled hostility. Lorenzo the Don recounted sanitized family histories while Gabriella watched every person at the table with deep suspicion. Marco brooded, Damen's relatives exchanged passive-aggressive barbs, and Avery? She simply held a sweet smile in place, realizing with a sickening certainty that she was finally learning the rules to their deadly game. Following the meal, Lorenzo summoned Damen for their usual private council. It was a Sunday ritual that consistently left Damen rigid and silent for the entire drive home. Avery never inquired, for who would want to know such secrets? Tonight, however, Daman chose to shatter the silence. He wants us to move into the family estate. Avery's head snapped in his direction. What? Apparently, the patriarch believed it was tradition for the heir to reside within the family compound. "You're the heir?" she asked, the shock absolute. "I'm the eldest grandson. That is the arrangement." "And what was your response?" I told him no. And the finality in his tone was absolute. Daman killed the engine, but did not move. "I will not have you living there. It is difficult enough to keep you safe here." That single word hung in the space between them. Safe, not happy, not content. Safe. "Am I in danger?" Avery asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daman's jaw clenched. "No. You're lying." "I'm being cautious." "Those are not the same thing, Daman." "Let it go, Avery." He exited the vehicle, ending the conversation. But Avery could not let it go. That night, she finally committed the one act she had been avoiding for weeks. She searched for Damien Viscari on the internet. Beneath the gleaming corporate persona, she discovered a deeply disturbed history. Rumors and accusations, and one particular article from 5 years ago that tied the Viscari family to organized crime. The author had been careful, employing words like alleged and rumored, but the message was unmistakable. Financial laundering, racketeering, and business rivals who had a tendency to disappear. Avery closed the laptop, staring into the darkness above. She had sensed it, the shadow that clung to this family. It was in Lorenzo's veiled threats, Gabriella's cryptic remarks, and the fear the staff disguised as respect. But to see it in print made it terrifyingly tangible. So she was married to some kind of mobster, a crime boss. The label hardly mattered. Her phone buzzed. It was the untraceable number again. "Do you think you're safe?" Her fingers trembled as she typed her reply. "Who is this?" She was met with silence. 10 minutes crawled by, then 20, then an entire hour. Only pure silence. And the gut-wrenching realization struck. This was far more perilous than a mere fraudulent wedding. The next morning, Daman found her in the library, submerged in memorabilia from her old teaching career. Lesson plans, student essays, all of it. "You miss it," he observed. It was not a question, but a statement of fact. "More with each passing day," he told her. "You could return to it in time." "Truly, is that even a possibility?" Avery met his gaze. "It's been nearly a month. They've surely hired a replacement." To which he simply said, "I checked. Cold. Fine. I will teach somewhere else." "Where?" "What school would hire a Viscari for 1 term? They will assume you are a wealthy girl playing a part. Or on a newlywed sabbatical, which is precisely what has occurred." "Is it?" Daman collapsed into a chair nearby, appearing utterly exhausted. She was beginning to recognize his signals, the steel in his shoulders, a jaw set like stone, the line etched between his brows. "What did you find?" he asked, his tone broadcasting a clear message. "Do not bother to lie." Her confusion was a flimsy defense. "Last night you were researching me online. I can see it on your face." A cold terror washed over Avery. "How could you possibly?" "I designed this network. I monitor every device in this house. That is a total violation of my privacy." "It is a security measure." He moved closer. "Now tell me what you saw." "Articles, allegations, rumors that your family is tied to the mob, and I require you to tell me the truth." Daman's silence was a deafening admission. When he finally spoke, his voice was pure ice. "My grandfather built an empire. Some parts were legitimate, others were not. By the time I understood the entire picture, It was all intertwined. That is not an answer to my question. It is the only answer you will receive. Avery searched for the right words. Are you part of that business? I oversee the legal ventures, real estate, development, that entire portfolio. I keep my hands clean of the other enterprises, but you are aware that they exist. Awareness is not the same as participation. It is far too close for my comfort. Damon stood so abruptly that Avery flinched away from him. He registered her fear, and his entire hardened facade seemed to disintegrate. I would never harm you. I never suggested you would. You recoiled from me. You moved so quickly. I am not my family, Avery. I do not. He trailed off, pulling a hand through his hair. It was the first time she had seen him completely lose his composure. I have dedicated my entire adult life to building something legitimate, something that won't implode when my grandfather passes and the vultures begin to circle his empire. This marriage, this ludicrous, artificial, temporary marriage, is a component of that strategy. It buys me time. It makes me appear stable. It provides me with leverage. So I am just a pawn in your game. You are a solution. There is a critical difference. Not from my perspective. They faced each other across the desk as a pure fury began to build inside Avery. Fury at him for entrapping her, at herself for accepting it, and at fate for presenting her with this impossible choice. I want to terminate this agreement, she declared, her voice low but steady. No, you do not. Yes, I do. Then leave. Damon's voice was arctic, his expression a perfect frozen mask. The door is not locked. You are free to depart. I will have the annulment documents prepared by dawn, but my debts would still remain. That was the arrangement we made. It's so profoundly unfair. It is. But this is the world we live in. He turned to leave, pausing to cast one final glance at her. You have a choice, Avery. You always have. The only question is if you can live with what comes after. And then he was gone, leaving her a quivering wreck of rage, fear, and an ache she couldn't name. Her gaze drifted to her copy of The Great Gatsby, to that impossible green light, a symbol for all the things we chase but can never hold. She thought of want, of victory, and of loss, and in the end, she remained. In the dead of night, she found him in his study, poring over documents that held fortunes in their ink. He looked up as she entered. I am staying, Avery announced. I know, but from you, I need absolute transparency. No more shocks, no more secrets. That isn't part of our contract. Then we are rewriting the contract. Damon put his pen down. You are asking for my trust. I am asking you to see me as a person, not a piece in your game. He considered this for a moment. What is it you must know? Everything, Avery replied, sinking into the chair opposite his. We can begin with who is sending me these disturbing text messages. The air around Damon shifted. Show them to me. She handed him her phone. He scanned the messages, his features hardening into stone. How long has this been going on? 3 weeks. It began just after the art gallery event. And you never once considered informing me? I was not certain that I could trust you. For God's sake, Avery. He shot to his feet, pacing the room. This is a serious matter. This is... He stopped, pulling out his own phone to place a call. I require a number traced. Send the results the instant you have them. He read the number aloud from her screen, then ended the call. You will have a new phone tomorrow and a security team. I am not having a security team. This is not a point for discussion. Someone is threatening you, which tells me they know of our arrangement, which tells me... He trailed off again. I have to contain this. Contain it? How? That is not your concern. It is absolutely my concern when I am the one being targeted. Daman crossed the space between them, crouching to meet her eyes. His gray gaze was a blazing, almost frightening fire. You must grasp a simple truth. The world I inhabit is not safe. Weakness is viewed as an invitation to destroy. Being my wife makes you a mark. I am able to protect you, but only if you allow me. By keeping me ignorant. By keeping you alive. The weight of his statement settled in the room with a heavy thud. Avery swallowed with difficulty. Who would want to cause me harm? Competitors, enemies, people who believe you are a vulnerability they can exploit to reach me. He rose to his full, imposing height. I was cautious. I kept this marriage quiet, but it is clear someone has been watching us. She asked him directly, Is your family responsible for this? No, they may loathe you, but they would never resort to a tactic like this. It is a boundary they refuse to cross. Then who could it be? I do not have a name yet, but believe me, I will find one. The next day, the protection detail materialized. 2 men built like mountains posted outside her door, shadowing Avery's every step. The house itself felt smaller, a suffocating pressure confirming her life was no longer her own. This is nothing short of a prison, she told Daman. You are being kept safe. The two feel identical. They are not remotely the same. The menacing texts ceased, but Avery could not shed the skin-crawling sensation of always being observed. Every vehicle that followed too closely, every stranger in the market whose look lingered too long, every distorted shadow. She felt as though she were being haunted, and she despised every moment of it. 2 weeks later, in the middle of a Sunday dinner, Lorenzo simply collapsed. It was sudden. One moment he was spinning a tale about a business negotiation in the 1970s. The next he was slumped in his chair, his face ashen, his breath a ragged whisper. The room plunged into chaos. Gabriella was screaming for an ambulance. Daman was instantly by his grandfather's side, feeling for a pulse. Marco was snapping orders into his phone, and Avery was frozen, watching the foundation of the empire that owned her begin to crumble. The ambulance arrived, and Lorenzo was rushed away. The family trailed behind in a somber line of black cars, abandoning Avery in a cold, sterile waiting room, surrounded by Viscaris whose masks had finally fallen. Gabriella was a broken, sobbing mess. Marco paced like a caged animal. Daman stood like a stone figure by the window, his eyes hollow, and his jaw set so tight Avery feared it might crack. She approached him as one would a wild, cornered thing. Are you okay? His response was toneless and final. He is dying. But they claimed he was stable. He is dying, Daman repeated. This is it, the start of the end. The doctors warned us months ago. His heart is failing. The cancer therapy destroyed the rest of him. Yes, it is merely a question of time. I am so very sorry, she whispered. Do not be. He lived longer than most men in our world. He always understood the cost. But that cold logic offered little comfort. Daman finally met her gaze, and for a heartbeat, his entire iron facade disintegrated. She witnessed pure, undiluted terror. When he is gone, he said, his voice a dark prediction, everything will burn. The family, the entire operation, every pact he held for 40 years. It will all implode. There will be a war for his crown. And you are expected to take it. I am expected to try. And what if you do not succeed? Someone else will, someone much, much worse. He looked out the window again. I just need him to hold on for 6 more months, just 6, and this entire fabricated marriage will have fulfilled its purpose. The sole purpose was to present an image of legitimacy, of solidarity, of being untouchable. But when she questioned if the old dawn could truly last 6 months, Damon's silence was an answer in itself. Lorenzo survived the night. He was moved to the ICU, tethered to a chorus of machines that now breathed for him. The family maintained a constant vigil, a parade of pale specters haunting his bedside. Avery found herself there at 3 a.m, listening to the machines sigh on his behalf while Damon was asleep in a chair. The old man's eyelids fluttered open, lost in a haze, then they focused on her. "You are still here," he rasped. "Where else would I be?" "A smart girl." His hand lifted in a weak motion and she took it. His skin felt like cold, brittle paper. "Do you love him yet?" "What?" "Damon, do you love him?" A perfectly crafted lie formed on her lips, the kind of response her father had conditioned her to give. But Lorenzo's gaze pierced through the deception, and the true answer tumbled out. "I do not know." A faint, grim smile touched Lorenzo's lips, a gesture of both pain and respect. The only honest answer. "You do not know love. You survive it." His grip tightened. "You are what he requires. You are his humanity. Do not allow him to lose it when I am gone." "You are not going anywhere. We are all going somewhere, child. The only thing that matters is if the legacy we leave behind has meaning." His eyes drifted shut. "Watch over him. He is going to need you." Lorenzo faded, leaving Avery crushed by the weight of a dying man's final request. Across the room, Damon began to stir. He looked from his grandfather to her, and a silent moment of truth connected them, a shared resignation to the reality that their world was splintering, and they were utterly powerless to prevent it. "Come here," Damon rasped. Avery moved to him, and he pulled her onto his lap, his arm a solid presence as she finally allowed herself to lean against him. This was not a performance, not for any unseen lens, but an embrace born of a raw, desperate need she had felt for the first time in this twisted existence. They stayed that way as dawn bled through the windows, just as the doctors declared Lorenzo's condition had stabilized. Once the family reassembled, the performance resumed. And still, the atmosphere between Avery and Damon had profoundly changed. The hard, definite line they had drawn between their roles and their reality was beginning to dissolve. 3 weeks later, Lorenzo came home, a specter of his former self, but breathing. The family shared a tense dinner, if the Viscaris were even capable of quietude. Avery had ceased trying to follow the ceaseless procession of functions. It had all become one long, wearying act of forced smiles and cautious phrases, all measured against a standard she could not comprehend. But since the hospital, Damon's touch was altered. It was a secret dialect no one else perceived, but his hand would find hers beneath the table. He would draw her closer in a crowded space, his palm on her back a silent declaration. And late at night, she could hear the restless cadence of his pacing from his own room. Twice, on 2 separate nights, she discovered him standing in her doorway, just observing, as if confirming she had not dissolved into the night. "You do not have to do that," she had said. "Do what?" "Stand guard." "I am not standing guard. I am..." He searched for the right word. Checking on you. I am fine. You are never fine. Neither am I. But we are both still standing here. There was no romance in their words, nothing soft. It was only the cold, unyielding truth. And Avery was learning that with Daman, this kind of stark honesty was more valuable than any precious stone. The morning their world finally shattered began with a deceptive calm. As Avery sat reading in the library, the solace of her novel was shattered as Daman swept into the room. His face was a stark, pale mask of catastrophe, his jaw set with the finality of ruin. We need to go, immediately. Avery set her book aside. What is it? In the vehicle. Grab your purse, Avery. Now. The order in his voice was a sliver of pure, cold steel. She gathered her things, following his path to a black SUV inside the garage. This machine was not one of their usual transports. The windows were so dark they were almost a confession. Get into the back, Daman instructed, and keep your head out of sight. What on earth is happening? Someone leaked photographs of us. From before. Avery felt the lifeblood drain from her face. What kind of pictures? The chapel's security feed. You, intoxicated, barely aware. Me, essentially keeping you upright. It appears. He paused. It appears to be precisely what it was. How severe is this? Severe enough to be everywhere. Severe enough that my family is demanding explanations I cannot provide. So severe his phone began to vibrate. He shot it a look of contempt and silenced the call. Severe enough that we must disappear until I can bring this under control. They traveled for 2 hours, pushing east into the barren heart of the desert. Mason, her silent protector for weeks, offered only brief, cryptic updates into his phone. Daman was a full-blown hurricane on his own device, his voice a low, lethal instrument aimed at soldiers she could not perceive. I don't give a damn what their price is. No statement. 0. A beat of silence, then raised the offer, purchase every last copy. I want them erased by midnight. Another drawn-out pause. 'Cause if you don't, you're finished. That is the reason. He ended the call, only to initiate another. Where are you taking me? Avery murmured. A secure location, entirely off the grid, known only to Mason and myself. What about your family? Especially not my family. They reached a structure in the absolute middle of nowhere. It was no cabin. Daman avoided the rustic, but it was profoundly isolated. Solar arrays and a generator could sustain it for weeks on end. Mason performed a security check of the perimeter as Daman guided her indoors. The interior was a single, bare room, a sterile, fortified box that felt less like a sanctuary and more like a holding cell. How long will we be here? Avery questioned. For as long as it requires. Daman was already transfixed by the news on his phone, his expression darkening with each image he viewed. Show me. No. Daman, that's my image. I deserve to know. He met her eyes for a long, weighty second before surrendering the phone. I did warn you. The headlines were nothing less than a public execution. Billionaire's inebriated wedding farce. Teacher trapped in a gilded cage. The pictures were a journey into a complete nightmare. There she was, a foolish napkin for a veil, her makeup a mess, supported by a man whose features she could not recall. The images were low quality, but the narrative they wove was vicious and perfectly clear, clear enough to shout the sordid reality of their entire arrangement. This is terrible, she breathed. It's a disaster. It introduces the one variable I could not allow, uncertainty. It forces people to ask if any of this is legitimate. It's not legitimate. I'm aware, you're aware, but the public cannot be. He reclaimed his phone. And at this moment, the entire world is looking. By sunrise, the press will be merciless, opportunist, forced marriage, every vile theory they can conjure. His relatives will demand explanations, and Lorenzo will be enraged. Damon's entire universe is unraveling, his meticulous strategy ruined by a guard seeking a payout. "You'll sue?" she inquires. That is already underway, but the narrative is loose. The harm has been done. Avery sinks onto the couch, trembling, and asks about his plan. His approach? Disappear and pray a more significant scandal pushes them from the news cycle. And if it doesn't, Damon moves to sit beside her. And then, for the very first time, he truly, genuinely sees her. "Then we will manage it, as a team." She is utterly stunned. "I believed this was purely a transactional agreement." He concedes it began as such, but now matters have become intricate. "How intricate?" she insists. He then admits that during the past 3 months, she ceased being a pawn and transformed into something essential. Avery is shaken. He instantly clarifies, "Do not misinterpret this. It is not a profession of love. It is a statement of fact. You are essential, and I secure my assets, nothing more." But she challenges him. "Is it?" He evades, gazing into the desert, merely stating that his man Mason is standing guard. "We are completely protected here. No one can reach us," he states. She retorts, "Do you honestly believe they would make an attempt?" He spells it out plainly. "When this much money is at stake, men become predators. And our union, that is blood in the water. The remainder of the day is deathly still. He is brokering deals over the phone while she merely gazes at a book, absorbing not one word. Her thoughts are trapped in a cycle, replaying those horrific images, her entire desperate plight laid bare. Now the world knows their marriage was founded on liquor and poor judgment, not affection. As darkness descends, Damon starts a fire, and she feels herself drifting closer to it. He approaches the sofa, presenting 2 glasses of whiskey. "I do not drink," she says, but he dismisses it. "You did on one occasion. Consider how that transpired." She responds without emotion. "That isn't amusing." He half smiles. "Slightly amusing." He extends the glass once more. "You are not required to drink it, but it is available." She accepts it, observing the amber liquid. "I have no memory of that evening, not one detail." Her voice cracks. "I don't recall meeting you, or consenting, or I don't recall becoming this." "This what?" he probes, his tone unexpectedly gentle. "Mrs. Viscari, the disaster in those photos. The woman so lost that a stranger's proposition seemed like her only salvation." He simply shakes his head. "You weren't lost, you were drowning." "What is the distinction?" Damon takes a large swallow of his drink. "I have made numerous poor decisions in my life. Marrying you was not among them." She is taken aback. "Even with this situation exploding around us? Even now?" He sets his glass down, turning deadly serious. "You want the true reason I did it? You assumed I required a plausible story." "Yes, that was the arrangement, but not my motivation." He shifts to face her directly. "I did it because, for the first time in my existence, someone looked at me and didn't see the fortune, didn't see the family legacy. They just saw a man in a chapel at 3 in the morning who was as adrift as they were. You saw a person. And I..." The words catch in his throat. "I needed to hold on to that. If only for a moment, even if it was false, I needed to be perceived that way just for a little while longer. Avery feels her chest constrict. Damen, But he cuts her off. I am not asking for a response. I am simply providing the truth you wanted. So now you have it. The only noise is the crackling of the fire. Avery's entire perspective is shifting. The defenses she built are beginning to fracture. This cold, strategic man just exposed a piece of his soul to her, and she has no idea how to handle it. I am afraid, she finally breathes. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of what occurs when the 6 months conclude and I must revert to being a nobody. You are not a nobody. I was. Before you, I was unseen. I taught students who didn't care, was drowning in debt, and saw my mother's recognition of me fade weakly. I was going under, as you said, and now I am. She gestures vaguely at their surroundings, unable to form the words. I no longer recognize who I am. You are Avery. That has not altered. Everything has altered. Damen reaches for her, his motion slow, allowing her space to retreat. She remains still. His hand cups her jaw, his thumb tracing her cheek. Not everything. She should have pulled away, should have cited their contract, but she did not. She leaned in, and when he kissed her with such impossible gentleness, she kissed him back. It was not a grand cinematic moment. No symphony swelled, the earth did not move. It was merely two performers who became so immersed in their roles they lost track of reality, now seeking it in one another. When they separate, he presses his forehead to hers. This is a profoundly bad idea. Quite possibly the worst, she conceded. We need to stop this. We do. Yet neither of them moved. I can offer you no guarantees, he said, his voice a deep vibration. No fairy tale conclusion. I can't promise I won't shatter you. It is not in my nature. Then promise me nothing, Avery replied. Just be present with me now, that is sufficient. They remained there as the fire dwindled to glowing embers. His arm was secured tightly around her. Her head rested upon his chest. There was no further conversation, no more strategizing, only two individuals in a place where pretense was unnecessary. She eventually succumbed to pure exhaustion. When Avery awoke much later, she was covered in a bed. Damen was on the sofa, his jacket folded for a pillow, still assuming the role of protector, maintaining his distance, attempting to manage a situation that had spiraled far beyond his control. The next 3 days unfolded like a surreal domestic illusion. No criminal empire, no obligations, no falsehoods. Simply Avery and Damen existing in a pocket of truth, learning how to be genuine with each other. Their conversations turned to ordinary subjects, the books they enjoyed, their most humiliating experiences, the small fragments that construct a person. Damen shared the unvarnished account of his father, discovering the body, the funeral where the 8-year-old Vaskari successor was forbidden from crying. He spoke of the nightmares that plagued him for years. Avery recounted the story of her mother, of a diagnosis delivered too late, and the agony of witnessing someone you adore become a stranger. She admitted her guilt for not visiting more often, how each visit was a new form of torment. You are a good daughter, Damen said to her one evening as she prepared their meal. I'm the worst kind of daughter. It's been weeks since I even visited her. Because you're caught in a world you never chose. That isn't on you. But it feels like it is. Burdens always do. That doesn't make them true. He passed her a blade. Here, channel your remorse into these onions. On the 4th day, Mason arrived bearing the solution. The lawyers had woven their spell. The chapel was compensated, the footage was wiped, and a new fable was fed to the media. The photos were deceptive, a young pair, an impulsive ceremony, a little too much champagne, a complete non-story. It won't erase the narrative, Mason conceded, but it will starve it of air. Give it a week, maybe 2. And my family, Damen pressed. Gabriella managed them. She framed it as tabloid fiction. Lorenzo believed her. Lorenzo is losing his touch. He'd accept any tale that safeguards his ascent. Nevertheless, the strategy succeeded. Mason then fixed his gaze on Avery. You are both cleared for return. Home. The word felt like a fraud on her tongue. That mansion was no home, it was a command post. To go back meant wearing the masks again, and Avery was terrified she'd forgotten the part. The drive into Vegas was drenched in silence. The city's glow bloomed on the horizon, a glittering lie. Avery watched it approach, a knot of pure dread tightening deep in her stomach. She loathed the thought of returning, of resuming the performance of Mrs. Viscari. For 4 days, she had been only Avery, and the gravity of that loss was just now crashing down on her. We must address what happened, Damen said, steering the car into the long drive. Do we really have to? Yes. And what if I don't wish to? Then we will not. But eventually. Eventually what? We acknowledge this arrangement is no longer a charade? That we've crossed a threshold from which there is no retreat? Avery turned to face him. What is the conclusion here, Damen? This contract dissolves in 2 months. And then? I don't know. That is not a sufficient answer. It is the only one I possess. He silenced the engine. I don't know how to navigate this. Look, I am unable to give you what you are owed, but His voice cracked, the words refusing to form. I cannot release you. But our agreement specifies. The agreement is meaningless, he cut in. This is just me asking. Not the lord of this estate, not your husband by contract, me. Is this something you want? Avery's heart hammered her ribs. This was the precipice. To remain was an incredible gamble. To leave was to go back to an abyss. No choice felt right. I don't know, she breathed. Damen just nodded, his face etched with the disappointment he had clearly foreseen. Understood. Inside, the mansion felt alien, its warmth a fabrication, the very air thin and cold. Or perhaps Avery had been altered because after 4 days of being real, she could no longer sustain the lie. Sleep was an impossible wish that night. She lay in the cold expanse of her bed, tracing the shape of shadows on the ceiling. Across the hall, she could discern Damen's ceaseless, restless pacing. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand, a message from a number she had struggled to purge from her memory. Your time has expired. Tomorrow, midnight. The message was a stark ultimatum. Appear alone, or this is finished. A wave of cold dread submerged her. With her thoughts in chaos, she flew across the corridor, bursting into Jimin's room. He spun, with the sharp reflex of a predator sensing a threat. What is it? She spoke no words, simply offering the phone. In his eyes, she saw a darkness she had never witnessed. A rage so pure, so concentrated, it felt utterly lethal. That brutal question hung in the charged air. Her answer was a ghost of a whisper. But him? He was already in motion, phone to his ear, calling in his forces. Get a trace, he commanded. Find them. He turned back to her, his voice pure steel. You're not going. Her protest died before it even started. It's a setup, he said flatly. A play to get you away from me. I'm not letting that happen. Her fear was just a tiny question. But what if it isn't? Then I'll fix it. He stepped in, hands on her shoulders, grounding her in the middle of this hurricane. Listen, you stay here. You go nowhere without me or Mason, understood? A small nod was all he needed before pulling her into a crushing hug. Smashed against his chest, their hearts beat the same frantic rhythm. He breathed a promise into her hair. I won't let them touch you. This ends with me. Her reply was just a breath. How? His answer was ice cold. By being the monster they already think I am. The next day was pure, slow burn torture. Mason turned their home into a fortress, adding 3 more stone-faced guards to the perimeter. Damon's day was just a series of cold commands and barked orders Avery couldn't even begin to understand. Night fell, sealing the house like a tomb, but the attack they were braced for never came. The silence just got deeper, louder, and way more creepy. At 1 a.m, Damon finally broke it. A fake out. They just wanted to freak you out. The who question haunted them for 2 days until the answer showed up on their doorstep. It was Gabriella, her face like a granite statue. We need a meeting, she announced. The 3 of us. They met in Damon's office, where the family matriarch looked small, weighed down by a weariness Avery had never seen. Without any build-up, Gabriella dropped the bomb. It was Marco. The only sign it landed was Damon's jaw tightening. What? He hired someone to scare her, she explained, to make her run. He bet that if she vanished, you'd look weak to Lorenzo, creating a power vacuum for him to fill. You're proof. Last night, Gabriella said, he came to my house, hammered, and confessed the whole stupid plan. He thought it was funny, a slick move. Gabriella's face hardened. Not slick. Idiotic. And now he's a danger to our entire organization. Damon's question was instant. Where is he? Handled. My people have him. Her eyes flicked from him to Avery. But this is far from over, Damon. Marco's desperate, which makes him a loose cannon. The real fight starts after Lorenzo is gone. You need to be ready. I am. No, she cut him off. You're compromised. This thing with her has made you a target. Damon shot to his feet. Leave, Gabriella. I said leave. When she was gone, the silence was suffocating. Avery watched Damon pace, a man at war with himself, and she saw the exact second he lost the battle. The quiet shattered when his hand smashed against the desk. This is my fault, he hissed. How can you even say that? I'm the one who dragged you into this nightmare, he shot back. I made you a target. He stopped, turning to face her. You have to leave now while you still can. Take the money, vanish, wipe this entire life away. His voice was hollow, totally empty of what he wanted. What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me, she insisted. His reply was one single painful question. Why? I come from a line of broken men. I'm controlling. I've completely wrecked your life and put you in mortal danger. What possible reason could you have to stay? She stepped forward, closing the space between them. She was so close she could feel the fear that was powering his anger. Because you remember I like cheap vanilla creamer, she whispered. Because you're the one who watches over me at night. The one whose kiss felt like the only real thing. Her voice shook. And maybe I'm just tired of running. Maybe I'm choosing to stay, to face whatever is coming, no matter how scary it is. Even if it blows up in our faces, maybe you're a risk I'm finally willing to take. Damon just stared, confused, like she was speaking gibberish. You're being irrational. Probably, she agreed. But I'm still here. His question was a dare. For how long? I can't say. Don't ask me for promises I don't have. Her fingers balled up the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. I am here with you. Isn't that enough? His words get lost in a kiss, not a gentle one, but a desperate one, like a drowning man gulping for air. Avery's response is just as chaotic, a flood of months of fear, confusion, and a desire she wasn't supposed to feel. When they break apart, their foreheads rest together in a moment of shared weakness. I don't know how this is supposed to work. Neither do I. We're probably going to fail. Maybe. But we'll face that failure together. This pact to go down in flames turns out to be dead on. 3 days after Gabriella's warning, Marco vanishes. He's not dead, Damen says, his voice like a doctor's. Just reassigned. He was shipped off to a family estate in Italy with a very simple order: never return. The command came from Lorenzo's deathbed, his voice thin, but his judgment final. Family does not put family in danger. Marco broke that rule. This was his punishment. Will he be safe there? Avery asks. Safer than here, Damen confirms. Our grandfather's mercy has its limits, but exile isn't a death sentence. Marco gets to live. He's just not one of us anymore. And his partner in crime? Handled. Avery knew better than to ask what handled meant, learning that some answers are better left in the dark. The entire mood of the house changed after that. The security team stayed, but the kind of tension had changed. Avery went from being a prisoner to an asset that needed guarding. The shift was small but huge. Damen stopped treating her like she was made of glass and started seeing her as a partner who could handle the grim reality. He talked about failed deals, about family members circling Lorenzo's throne like vultures, and about the nonstop power struggle where only strength gets you respect. You don't have to tell me this, Avery said one night. A real meal, just them, eating out of cartons with the staff gone. Actually, I do. You're in this world now, completely. You have a right to know the danger. The world arrayed against us. His gaze found hers, ignited by a new intensity. Yes, us. And just like that, the pretense between them dissolved. Avery took his bedroom, but many nights were spent simply tracing the fractured maps of their past through words. Damen recounted the horror of discovering his father's body. Avery spoke of the day her mother's mind fractured, looking at her own child as if she were a ghost. They presented their wounds to one another like sacred offerings, hoping to build a fortress from the ruin. There is something you must know, Damen began one morning as dawn spilled across the desert floor. Lorenzo was failing far more quickly than anyone predicted. The doctors speak in weeks, not months. A cold weight settled deep inside Avery. I'm so sorry. Don't be. He is at peace with it. He admitted he was weary of the fight. Beneath the sheets, Damen's hand sought hers. This changes the timeline. The whole world is about to catch fire. The family will begin their maneuvers. So I must have your answer. Are you truly on my side? After he is gone, there is no more gray area. You are either an ally or a mark. How very romantic. I'm being pragmatic. I know. Avery met his stare. I'm with you, on one condition. Name it. When this is done, when you hold all the power and this madness is over, you walk away. A shadow crossed Damen's features. Away from what? This enterprise, the part that thrives in darkness. She offers him the only 2 exits this life provides, a cage or a coffin. Her expression is stone. She will not stand by and watch him become another offering to a legacy of violence. This is her line in the sand. He insists one cannot simply resign from this world. So she dares him to be cleverer, to engineer a new escape route. He possesses the mind and the ruthless focus required. He could forge another way. Her voice finally breaks as she plays her last card. Because I love you, and I will not lose you to a world you never asked for. The words, spoken for the first time, hung in the air between them. A storm of emotions crossed Damon's face before settling on stark disbelief. "Say it again," he whispered. "Which part?" he asks. And she answers, "The part where I love you." Then she clarifies everything. "I love you, despite you being a controlling lunatic with a vault of secrets and appalling taste in takeout." He tries to object. "My palate is exquisite," but she cuts him off. "You ordered sweet and sour pork. That is an affront to cuisine." And then, from a place he didn't know existed, he answers, "I love you too." The confession sounds as if it just escaped a 2-decade sentence. He cannot pinpoint its origin. The chapel, perhaps. The hospital. Maybe only yesterday. But its truth is undeniable, leaving him utterly shaken. He wonders aloud how they can survive this without destroying it all. Her reply? "Then we will let it shatter and rebuild it, you and I." She affirms it with a kiss. "But you must promise me you'll try to break free from this life before it devours you whole." He vows he will, but not yet. There is a hurricane he must weather first. That hurricane arrived with no warning. By Tuesday, Lorenzo was gone. Avery was at his side when it happened. She had been visiting the old Don frequently while Damon managed his affairs. Lorenzo cherished her visits, sharing sanitized tales of his youth, of an empire built from nothing and a grandson forged into a weapon far too soon. Lorenzo, his voice a thread, had told her once, "You are his salvation. You make him desire to be a man, not merely a monarch." Avery had tried to protest. "He is a good man." But Lorenzo would not hear it. "No, he is the instrument I crafted, precise, cold, and without feeling." The old man's weary gaze held hers. "But you are undoing my work. You are making him human. Do not let that part of him die with me." She promised. He insisted, "Swear it. Swear you will guard the man who wears the crown." She swore it. A faint smile graced his lips. "Good girl." And then his eyes drifted shut. For a moment she believed he was only resting. Then the monitor screamed its flat, final note, and the room exploded into motion. A gentle hand guided her out into the hall. When Damon arrives, his face is ghost white, and they simply cling to each other as the staff wages a war that is already lost. It is finished. Within hours, the clan descends like carrion birds. Gabriella is the first, her expression a flawless, impenetrable mask. Marco's parents arrive. Aunts, uncles, cousins, a tide of unfamiliar faces materializes at the hospital, all of them cloaked in black. And every last one is measuring the others, predators assessing the field. The sorrow was present, certainly, but beneath it thrummed a raw, electric ambition. Lorenzo's passing had created a vacuum, and the war for succession was already beginning. The funeral was an immense production, filled with hundreds of faces. Lawmakers, tycoons, known criminals, and men who only appeared legitimate. At the front, Damon's features are a perfect sculpture of grief as he delivers a eulogy that was eloquent but utterly soulless. Afterward, he moves through the crowd, accepting condolences, playing the role of the devastated heir. Avery watches the man she knows disappear inside the performance. That night, in the quiet of their mansion, Daman finally broke. No tears came. She doubted he even could. He just sat on their bed, his head buried in his hands, his body racked by silent tremors of grief, fatigue, and stark terror. "I'm not prepared for this," was all he could manage to say. Avery sat beside him. "No one ever is." He just wanted more time. "I needed more time." "He gave you everything he had," she countered. "He made certain you were prepared." Damon's gaze lifted, his eyes wounded. "Did he? I feel like a boy in a king's robes, and they're all about to discover the throne is empty." She told him, "Then you must project the image of a king. It's all I've done since entering this world." "And see where it has led me," he retorted. "It has led us to here, still on our feet, together, which is more than most are given." He drew her into an embrace, and they remained that way. No words, no strategy, just holding on as the gravity of their new reality threatened to crush them. The will was read immediately after the service. Avery was not in attendance, as family by contract, not blood. She waited at the estate with Mason, her thoughts a whirlwind of worst-case scenarios. With each passing hour of Damon's absence, the dread in her stomach deepened. When he finally telephoned, 6 hours later, his voice was unnervingly hollow. "Can you come meet me? I need you to be here." She had Mason drive, a profound sense of foreboding her only companion. The mansion was a war zone. From Lorenzo's study she could hear shrieking. One voice was weeping, another screamed of lawyers and betrayal. Mason navigated her through the bedlam to where Damon and Gabriella stood, both looking as if they'd just survived a detonation. "What is going on?" Avery's voice was a whisper against the suffocating tension. Gabriella then delivered the first of Lorenzo's posthumous decrees. Damon was named the sole inheritor of the entire empire, every company, every last cent. But it came with a stipulation. A nerve ticked in Damon's jaw. "What is the condition?" he bit out. "Our marriage," she replied, "is now absolute. No annulment, no divorce. For the next 10 years, any move to separate would forfeit the entire inheritance to a trust, rendering him completely without power." Avery's reality fractured. The old man was maneuvering his pieces from beyond the grave. With chilling calm, Gabriella revealed the second decree. Lorenzo had granted Avery full authority over all family financials, plus an equal vote in major business decisions. "He has effectively made you a queen, Avery," Gabriella observed. "I don't want any of his money," Avery fired back. "That is no longer a choice." The fortune was now theirs, indivisible, provided they remained married for a decade. Gabriella's eyes moved between them. "The family is agitated. They will contest this. Legal battles are imminent. They intend to make your existence a living hell." But Lorenzo's final will was a fortress constructed over his last 6 months to be impenetrable. "I need some air," Avery breathed, and before they could react, she pushed past the seething relatives and fled to the garden. The desert night was crisp and cold as she hugged herself, struggling for each breath. 10 years. Lorenzo had bound them to each other for an entire decade. One part of her was repulsed by the calculated maneuver, but another, the part that genuinely loved Damon, registered something else. Perhaps it was a form of security, or perhaps it was an unspoken permission. Lorenzo had, in essence, commanded them to stop the charade. Damon found her there 20 minutes later, and they stood in shared silence, observing the distant neon pulse of the Vegas skyline. "I am sorry," he said at last. "For what part?" she asked. "For this. For the claws, for pulling you deeper into this life." He hesitated. "And for the fact that even my grandfather's affection came with conditions." Perhaps he thought he was protecting us by making it impossible to part. "We would have remained together regardless," Avery said, turning to him. "Wouldn't we have?" And for the first time, Damon's composure completely shattered. "I cannot answer that without it sounding like a response to his terms." "Then ignore the will," she insisted. "If he had given you everything, without any conditions, would you still want me by your side?" "Yes." The word was immediate, stripped bare, and utterly true. "Yes, I would want you to stay. I would have pleaded with you to stay. But I cannot promise you a life of safety. I cannot promise you peace. I can only promise to be better than the man this family created. And I'm offering to love you through that whole fight. A quiet promise." "That's enough," she answers. In the moment she takes his hand, he pulls her into an embrace, a collision of fierce possession and profound protection. "But you still have to find a way out of this life. You promised me." He confirms with a nod. "I remember." "I'm holding you to the promise." "I know." The months that followed were nothing short of a war. The family fractured down its very spine. Some of Lorenzo's old guard took their earnings and vanished. The younger blood splintered, some aligning with Damon, others conspiring for his fall. In a strange turn of fate, Gabriella became his anchor, her influence silencing dissent and neutralizing the gravest threats. But the wolves continued to circle, their hunger for conflict unsated. There were nights Damon would return home, looking as though he'd walked through hell, a deep silence shrouding the grim bargains he struck to hold his throne. Avery, witnessing the war raging inside him, finally broke the silence. They were in bed, yet he was worlds away, countless battles etched on his face. She whispered, "I'm losing you to this." He shot back, "I'm right here." "No, you're not. You're trapped in your own mind, crafting violent plans you conceal from me, and I'm watching you become the very monster you swore you'd never be." The words found their mark. He turned to her, the confession finally spilling out. "We have an issue with the Castellanos. Victor's nephew feels he's owed a larger share." This upstart was trying to force his hand for a bigger piece of the pie. Avery, ever hopeful, asks, "Can't you just give him a larger cut?" But Damien understood the game. "If I do that, every shark in the water will taste blood. They'll all come looking for a piece. I have to set a boundary." "What sort of boundary?" Damien's expression turned to ice, the kind that's buried 6 feet deep. "No," Avery gasped, sitting bolt upright. "You promised you were leaving this life, not digging a deeper grave for both of us." "I am, but I need to secure this first. If I step away now, chaos follows, and my people pay the price. And if you remain, you become Lorenzo's shadow, building his same prison, cutting his same deals, and in 20 years you'll be telling our own child to flee, just as your father told you." "It's not so simple, Stamine," he retorted. "The world doesn't operate on fairness, but you have a decision. Become the man who breaks this chain of violence, or be the one who continues it. You can't be both." And with that, a cold war descended upon them for weeks, their battles fought with quiet words that sliced like razors. He was fixated on securing his dominion first. She insisted another crisis would always appear, another reason to postpone their life. A perfect impasse. Then an assassin made a move on Damien. It happened just after a meeting in Vegas. One moment he was heading to his car. The next, his guard Mason was throwing him to the pavement as gunfire shattered the windows into crystalline webs. The news reached Avery in the middle of a lecture. She fled to the hospital, discovering Damien already being discharged. "I'm fine," he stated the instant she burst in. He bore a harsh scrape on his forehead, but nothing more. The gunman had missed. Mason had been quicker. "You are not fine. Someone just attempted to kill you." Avery's hands trembled so violently she clenched them into fists. This was her deepest fear, made real and vivid before her. "I know," Damien said, drawing her into a hug, completely ignoring the attending nurse. "I know. And you've been right all along. This is finished. We're done." Avery was stunned. "Are you being serious?" "Completely. I am finished. I don't care what I need to burn, what empire must fall. I am walking away." Could it truly be that straightforward? It is that simple. Because the thought of truly losing you, I refuse to exist in that reality. But escaping the syndicate is no clean break. It is a slow, agonizing amputation, a process that consumed a year of secret negotiations and calculated retreats. Damien severed all the family's illicit operations, leaving only scraps for the scavengers while preserving the legitimate ventures. He constructed a legal fortress just strong enough to keep the authorities at bay. It was not a clean process, not by any measure. Old allegiances died violently and outstanding debts remained, tethering him to a life of blood pacts and shadowed streets. Yet, a new dawn was breaking. It was enough for Damien to finally breathe, and for Avery to cease scanning headlines for his name. The family's reaction was, predictably, catastrophic, launching threats and clumsy blackmail efforts. It all came to a head at Thanksgiving when Damien's uncle broke a wine glass over his head, screaming that he was desecrating Lorenzo's memory. But Gabriella enforced the new order like a sentinel, and with the old guard supporting her, the insurgency died out. On the second anniversary of his ascension, Damien's corporate reinvention was finished. The Viscaris were now a lawful, almost mundane enterprise, a transformation that would have made Lorenzo either swell with pride or turn in his grave. "So, how does this feel?" Avery asked one evening, ending the quiet. They were in their bedroom, a space that finally resembled a home, not a stronghold. She had overwritten the mansion's bleak past with photographs and books, evidence of a real existence. "Strange, too still. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "It's not going to." "It always does." "Not this time," she vowed, leaning in to kiss him. "We managed. Against every odd, we survived." "You say that as if the fight is over," Damien murmured, pulling her closer still. "I'm not convinced it ever is," he conceded. "But perhaps that's all survival is, simply choosing to stand your ground when fleeing is the easier path." "That's remarkably deep." "I'm a changed man." "No, you're not." "I'm attempting to be." "You're getting closer." 18 months on, they married once more, this time to erase the stain of a sordid Las Vegas chapel. This time, there were no contracts, no attorneys, no exit strategies. It was a genuine wedding, set in a garden purged of Lorenzo's lingering shadow. And to the astonishment of all, Gabriella wept. Avery was in a simple gown, and Damien wore a suit that spoke of hope, not of dominion. "I can't believe we're doing this a second time," Avery murmured beneath a trellis of blossoms. "Third time's the charm. This is our second." "I'm including the courthouse trip to legitimize the drunken one. That makes 3. "That is not how arithmetic works." The officiant cleared his throat. Whenever you are prepared. Then they spoke their vows, authentic words pulled from the fabric of their own fractured history, making promises they could at last uphold, to choose one another without fail every day. After the I-do's, Damien kissed her as if for the first and final time. Was it all worth it? He whispered against her lips. Inquire again in 50 years. I intend to. Their existence settled into a new cadence, one that closely resembled peace. Avery returned to her teaching career at a school supported by charity, not by blood money. Damien managed his legitimate enterprise from a home office, swapping boardroom warfare for tranquil evenings with his wife. Their entire connection was a pattern of conflict and reconciliation, of learning to be partners without a map. Then one evening, Avery delivered a shock. I want a child. Damien, pulled from his work, was utterly unprepared. A child? Yes, a small human. I would like one. For how long have you been thinking this? The notion became real about 3 months ago. I was afraid of how you'd react. Why would I? And then he understood. You assumed I would refuse. You don't precisely project fatherly vibes. My reputation has never aligned with my truth. He closed his laptop for the night. Are you certain you want a child with me? It was always and only you. You realize this will be an absolute catastrophe, don't you? I have no clue how to be a father. I suspect your own father didn't either. You will learn. We are going to mess this up monumentally. We're specialists at that. We have ample experience. 2 years on, Avery revealed she was pregnant. It was a complete deviation from their carefully constructed life. When she broke the news, Damien looked as if he'd been handed the keys to the cosmos. Are you certain? I did 4 tests, all of them positive. 4? I am thorough. He crossed the room, enveloping her in his arms. And for the first time she could recall, his hands were unmistakably trembling. We're having a baby, he uttered, his voice steeped in pure wonder. A baby. I am absolutely going to damage this person, and I will be right here to help you put them back together. She raised her lips to his for a kiss. We can damage it in tandem. Their daughter made her entrance on a Tuesday, wailing with her father's unyielding spirit and her mother's flawless timing. They called her Elena. The moment that child was placed in Damien's arms, he shattered. Tears flowed freely down his face as he gazed at her, as if she were the most magnificent and terrifying sight he had ever beheld. She's so tiny, Damien whispered. All newborns are. What if I drop her? You will not drop her. What if she breaks? You are not going to break her. You are going to cherish her, guard her, and be so absurdly overprotective she will be forbidden to date until she is 30. He counters. 40. Very well, they compromise. 35 it shall be. Damien's gaze shifted between Avery and Elena, utterly adrift. I have no idea how to do any of this, she answered. Neither do I, but we will navigate it. That's what we do. And so they did, in the center of a gorgeous, swirling storm of chaos. Elena was a small whirlwind, a child who waged a war on sleep that lasted an entire year. Avery returned to teaching part-time, adrift in a fog of infant formula and fantasies of sleep. Damien approached fatherhood like a hostile takeover, consuming parenting manuals and tracking every single milestone. He announced her smile as he entered the room where Avery rested. She dismissed it as gas from a 3-week-old, but he refused to yield. It was a true smile, he insisted, a sign of a daughter's love for her father. Avery replied flatly that he had lost his mind. He called it fatherhood. 2 years on, their son Marco arrived, his name a deliberate olive branch extended to the fractured family. The birth of a new generation began to soothe old wounds. It's hard to harbor resentment with grandchildren to love. Even the exiled Marco Sr. could attend dinner without a fight. The old boss, now apparently a reformed family man in Italy, sent an apology that rang surprisingly true, perhaps because he saw what they had become. Then, a genuine tragedy landed. Avery's mother passed when Elena was just 3. In that crushing grief, Damien was her unwavering anchor. And in that moment, Avery knew this violent, beautiful, and insane life was the prize she had fought for all along. "Any regrets?" she murmured one night, worn down by 2 children under the age of 5. Damien, half asleep, asked her what she meant. She listed their entire chaotic history. A thick silence fell, and she thought he was asleep, but then he spoke. "I regret that night in Vegas." Her heart stopped. "Why?" "Because we were too drunk to remember it," he said. "We lost our beginning, but everything that came after." He faced her. "No, not one regret. You were the best chaos that ever entered my life." She called it a backhanded compliment, but he only grinned. "And you still said yes 3 times. Their sharp banter remained their signature. He'd claim her judgment was her biggest flaw. Her retort was instant. "Yours is too. You chose me." His reply never changed. "The single best choice I ever made." They would fall asleep entwined. Avery would dream of a cheap chapel, the beautiful disaster that had been her salvation. The years passed. Elena grew into a force of nature, inheriting his will and her heart. At 7, she was already planning to be a lawyer for the defenseless. Marco was the diplomat, a charmer with a core of pure compassion. "He has your soul," Damien would say to Avery. That instinct for seeing the good in people, however deeply it's hidden. The great house was finally alive with a joyful noise that money could never purchase. Birthdays were massive affairs. Halloween was a month-long production, and Christmas mornings began at 5 a.m. in a storm of torn paper. Silver appeared in Damien's hair. Avery earned lines around her eyes and saw them as trophies. They started a foundation in Lorenzo's name, and Damien attacked the mission with the same frightening intensity he'd once used to command his empire. She observed as his final emotional fortifications crumbled, showing her the man she always believed was there. They started to provide futures for children and erase the medical debt of broken families. They did it all in secret, not for recognition, but to ensure no one else would have to make the choices they had. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to the desert cabin, leaving the kids with Gabriella. The children came home full of sugar and knowing only a sanitized version of their family's truth. "Do you remember what you told me here?" Avery's voice was a whisper in the firelight. "I said many things," he replied softly. "You told me I was important." "You are," he affirmed. "And you said you had nothing to offer me." "I recall that." "You were wrong. You gave me everything." She rested against him in the space that was hers alone. "You vowed to fight for us, and you never did stop. For a deal made at gunpoint, this became so much more." Damien kissed her hair. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Always." "I wasn't honest that night. I said I didn't recall the wedding, but I did. Pieces of it. I recalled you laughing at the Elvis impersonator's bad joke. I recalled you asking if I was certain this was what I wanted. And I recall saying yes and meaning it, despite being drunk, reckless, and completely lost. I remember thinking you were the only real thing I had encountered in years." "Then why did you lie?" "I couldn't have you feeling cornered. I needed you to choose me freely every single day, not for a contract or a will or one wild night, only because you wanted to. And I do choose you every day, even when you are maddening. Especially then." They remained at the cabin for 3 days, finding a renewal they didn't even know they sought. Upon their return, Vegas felt different, less threatening. Or maybe they had grown into something stronger. Elena graduated at 17, an absolute force. She announced she would attend law school to defend the powerless. Avery recognized her own fire in her daughter. Harvard sent its acceptance. Damien was choked with emotion leaving her for her freshman year. "She is going to change the world," he said on the drive home. "She has your fire. She gets it from us both." Marco entered the corporate world, choosing green technology, building something new and clean, finally breaking the family's cycle of destruction. At 23, he finalized his first enormous deal. He called Damien, his voice unsteady with excitement. Damien guided him through the triumph. He told Avery later it was the proudest moment he had ever known. More than becoming the heir. Not even comparable. To see him build something of value, that is the only true legacy. The years continued their march. Gabriella passed away at 89, her mind clear until the end. She died in her sleep, and half of Vegas attended her funeral. The other half watched from a safe distance, a gesture of both fear and respect. Damien delivered the eulogy, and this time, every word about family was completely his own. In time, the family began to disperse. Some stayed near Vegas, while others left to build their own lives. The great house became quiet. In the stillness, Damien and Avery found a calm they grew to cherish, a final sanctuary from all the noise. "We endured," Avery said one evening, observing the desert sunset. Now in their 50s, aches were common, but their bond was a choice they reaffirmed daily. "We did. This was never supposed to survive." "No, but we are here." Damien took her hand, his fingers fitting perfectly between hers. And so, from all that chaos, their impossible union worked, like two fractured stones made smooth by a torrent, flawed and complicated, but always choosing each other, every day. Then Elena called, her voice electric with joy after winning her first landmark lawsuit, dismantling a pharmaceutical giant over insulin prices. Hundreds of families received reparations, and thousands were now safe under new laws. She was a torrent of happy tears, as was Avery, seeing her daughter become a champion. "You're a titan, my girl," Damien told her. "Well, I was taught by the best," Elena answered. "By both of you." The call concluded, leaving them in the quiet of a home that served as a museum to their 2 decades of madness. The walls held a gallery of photos and framed children's drawings, an entire life constructed from the rubble. Avery voiced the question, "Do you think Lorenzo ever pictured this?" Damien scoffed gently, "I think he only hoped. That is all any of us can do. Hope and persevere." He repeated the phrase, "hope and persevere," and choose love when it is easier to run. Outside, Las Vegas sparkled, a city founded on broken promises. The same city where a tacky chapel had bound them. The city that almost tore them apart. This was the very ground where they forged a bond that defied all logic. The enormous jewel on Avery's hand, a memento from that chaotic dawn, snags the final rays of light. She toys with the stone, a testament to a sham union that morphed into her ultimate reality. Beside it rested the plain gold band from their genuine ceremony. 2 rings, 2 promises, 1 spectacularly mad love affair. Unexpectedly, Damien speaks. We ought to renew our pledges. We did precisely that 10 years ago. I'm aware I want to do it every decade to reaffirm what we stand for. That is utterly absurd. So was wedding a stranger in Vegas. We did that too. Avery simply laughs. All right, but I choose the venue this time. Agreed. 6 months later, they are affirming their vows in that very garden, surrounded by the loyal few who endured the turmoil. Daman takes Avery's hands, offering this solemn truth. 2 decades ago, I made a reckless choice in a chapel at 3 a.m. Fueled by exhaustion, liquor, and hope, I married a woman I had never met, and somehow, impossibly, it evolved into this. It became affection, a home, the existence I truly craved. Avery, in turn, retorts without hesitation. 20 years ago, I awoke in an unknown house with a giant stone on my hand and absolute fear in my heart. I was certain I had made the worst mistake of my life. I was wrong. It was the most beautiful error because it led me here, to you, to this, to everything that is real. They kissed while their children cheered and the sun set. A perfect hard-won moment. Later that evening, she posed a question to Damien. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd gotten the annulment, if I had simply left? Every single day. You do. I do. And every single day, I am thankful that you chose to stay, even when I am impossible. Especially then. It proves you're still here, still choosing me. Always. And like that, the years continued on. Elena wed at 32 to a partner who brought her joy and cherished her intensely. At 35, Marco married his university love in a service that left no eye dry. Grandchildren began to arrive, 3 over 5 years, and the silent estate once more hummed with festive energy. Daman stepped down at 65, relinquishing his legitimate enterprises and making Avery his sole focus. They journeyed, devoured novels, and observed dusk from their balcony, discussing all things and nothing at all. Occasionally, Avery would find him simply gazing at her. What is it? She would inquire. Nothing, just incredibly thankful you're here. Where would I go? I have no idea. Anywhere else. You had every reason to leave, but you remained here with me. There is nowhere else I would ever wish to be. For their 30th anniversary, he returns her to the origin point, the very chapel where their chaotic tale began. To Avery, it now seems diminished, its gaudy allure eroded into something genuine and unvarnished. The familiar Elvis tribute artist occupies the stage, his vocals weathered by the years. Daman, what are we doing here? Avery murmured. I had to recall how that evening felt before our world became so impossibly tangled. It was already tangled back then. A valid observation. Daman gripped her hand more firmly. But I needed to be here with you, lucid this time, and say that if I faced it all once more, the arrangement, the deceit, the terror, the conflict, I would do it without hesitation, because each and every moment brought me directly to you. You've grown sentimental in your later years. I am not elderly. We are 70. That isn't old, it's classic. Avery's laughter was a low growl as she drew him close. I would repeat it all as well, every last bit, even the fractured moments. Those moments most of all, they shaped us. In that modest chapel, watched by the spirits of their past selves, they exchanged their promises again. Not for an officiant or an audience, only for each other. Two spirits who had braved every imaginable tempest and remained standing. "I love you," Daman stated. "I'm aware, still, forever, even when I'm ancient and difficult. Especially then." They emerged into the Vegas evening, a metropolis of shattered hopes holding the one dream that truly came to fruition. The metropolis was unchanged, yet they were profoundly altered individuals. They had transformed into roles they never envisioned. Companions, lovers, parents, and eventually grandparents. They were one another's haven. Ultimately, that was the entire narrative, not the impulsive bet of a marriage or the ruthless dynasty, not the peril or the spectacle or the staggering odds. It was simply the tale of two souls who made a dreadful decision in a glowing chapel and, defying all reason, cultivated it into a love that was eternal. They endured, they battled, they restored. They selected one another time and again, particularly when it was difficult. And 3 decades after a dawn of pure terror, Avery opened her eyes to absolute tranquility. Daman was beside her, his hair like silver, his face a testament to the journey they had shared. He remained her mooring, her constant, her chosen one. "Good morning," he offered. "Good morning." Coffee. Forever. They would rise in unison, a ritual polished over 30 years to meet a new day. Another opportunity to affirm their decision. Another day to demonstrate that from utter catastrophe, something magnificent can emerge. The jewel on her hand shimmered, refracting the light into 1,000 miniature rainbows. The very same ring, its vow at last redeemed by time. She once awoke to the face of a complete unknown. Now she awoke next to the man who understood every corner of her spirit. He had witnessed her most profound failings and had never once turned aside. The man who, alongside her, constructed a future from the embers, built on resolve and an indistinct "I do" in a tiny chapel. Their existence was far from flawless, but it was their own, and that was sufficient, more than sufficient. It was the whole world.
Life lesson: the cruelest thing fate can do is force people to choose between the life that protects them and the life that actually means something. This is the part where life gets sarcastic. She wanted money, stability, a way to stop sinking. He wanted legitimacy, order, a wife-shaped solution to a family-sized problem. Both of them basically told fate, just give me the minimum so I can breathe. And fate, being the absolute menace that it is, said, Balmers, sure, but I'm going to attach feelings, bullets, old trauma, succession wars, and emotional collapse to the package. That is why the story hurts, not because it is dramatic, but because it is unfair in such a familiar way. Everybody wants a cleaner choice than life is willing to provide. She wants to survive without losing herself. He wants to be loved without becoming vulnerable. Sorry, not available. Pick a struggle. And this is where the life lesson punches straight through the chest. People always say the hardest thing is betrayal. It is not. The hardest thing is when the person who hurts someone is also the first person who truly sees them. That is evil work by destiny. She sees the danger in him, yes, but she also sees the lonely human being trapped inside all that control. He sees her desperation, yes, but he also sees the one person who looks at him without mythology. That is why walking away becomes so painful, because now leaving is not just leaving danger, it is leaving meaning. And let us be honest, this is why audiences stay. Not for the mafia suits, not for the inheritance plot, not even for the revenge. They stay because the story keeps pausing to ask one brutal question. What if the thing that can destroy a person is also the thing that finally makes them feel alive? But here's the catch. The script never lets them get away with fantasy. It keeps dragging reality back in by the collar: threats, exposure, family manipulation, the weight of blood-built power. Every time they get close to something real, the old world reminds them that love without courage is just another beautiful lie. He cannot keep her and stay morally asleep. She cannot love him and pretend that danger is romantic. Somebody has to grow up. Somebody has to break the pattern. Otherwise, this is just a prettier version of doom. That is why the true victory is not the marriage lasting. The real victory is that they stop worshiping survival as the highest goal. At first, survival is everything. Pay the debt, avoid the scandal, stay alive, fine. But eventually, life demands more. It asks whether a person wants to merely escape disaster or actually become whole. Those are not the same thing. Plenty of people survive and stay emotionally ruined. So the final lesson is savage but useful. Security without truth is a cage. Passion without ethics is a fire. And love without change is just self-destruction wearing good lighting. They only win when they stop asking, how do we keep this arrangement alive? And start asking, what no, sacrifice, what kind of people do we have to become so this love does not poison us? That is why the ending works, not because it is soft, but because it is earned. They do not beat fate by avoiding pain, they beat it by refusing to hand their pain to the next generation. And honestly, that is the one plot twist life respects.